Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to look at connecting to a database. So I'm going to show you in this tutorial a technique for connecting to a database that is pretty widely used and that you can definitely use in practice, but it's not the absolute best recommended way to connect to a database. So I'm going to show you the simplest way here, and then in the next tutorial we'll look at the kind of approved way of doing it. So the stuff we're going to see here is not actually servlet specific, although we'll cover a few little things that are specific to servlets and JSPs. It's actually a general kind of technology for connecting to databases from Java called JDBC. And to connect to a database you need a driver that's appropriate for your database, and of course you'll need to install a database and have it somewhere running on a machine that you can access from your server application. So I've got a MySQL database here, and it's called WebShop, and I'm not going to cover SQL or databases in any depth in these tutorials, but I'll show you a few simple queries that you can use to get started if you don't know SQL. And this is the free MySQL Workbench application, and I've also downloaded and installed a MySQL database which is running on my machine. It's actually a laptop, so you don't need a hugely powerful machine to run this. And it's got one table in it which in a moment has an auto increment ID, so this just it's an ID column, and the numbers increase automatically when you insert stuff into the table. And it's got an email column here and a column for passwords, and I've just added two entries here, two sort of dummy entries to get started with. So let's just look at how I can access this WebShop database in Java. Now you're going to need, as I say, like the MySQL connector jar, which is if you're connected to MySQL, of course. And if you're connecting to Oracle or something, you'll need an Oracle JDBC connector jar. The MySQL one seems to be included with Tomcat, and in this Java EE Eclipse edition, the web apps seem to include it automatically. And if you want to check, just go to let's see, so this is my project that I've created called Databases, and under Java Resources you've got this Libraries thing. If you expand that, now you can see here I've got a where are we? I've got a MySQL connector Java something or other .jar, and that's what you need. And if you want to deploy to Tomcat, and later on we're going to look at deploying database applications to application servers like Google or CloudBees, then you need to make sure, well, for Tomcat you need to make sure that this is in the lib directory of Tomcat and your application server. Well, we'll cover that later, but for now, if you do want to deploy to Tomcat, if you look at the directory where you've installed Tomcat, it's got a lib folder, and you need to make sure that you've also got a connector.jar for your particular database in this lib folder. And to find connectors, if you just go to Google, and to take MySQL as an example, if I type in here MySQL JDBC connector jar, something like that, then you should find the connector you need pretty quickly, hopefully. And you can download the MySQL connector from this page if you haven't already got it. And the platform independent version works fine. I don't even know if there is another version actually. And it downloads actually in this case as a zip file, and you have to unzip the zip and get the jar out of it. So it's pretty straightforward, and then of course you can link it to your project in a normal way, like you go to build path, configure build path, and libraries, add jar or add external jar, and just browse to it. So let's assume that you've got the jar, the JDBC connector jar for your database in there, and you've got your database running. Let's write the code to connect to the database. So what I'm about to show you works absolutely fine in a JSP, where you can have a scriptlet tag that connects to the database and a scriptlet tag that disconnects, which closes the connection, which is very important. And in between, you can have a scriptlet. You can have like scriptlets that query the database, which we'll get onto in future tutorials. But here I'm going to show you as an example a servlet, and it's just the same for JSP, except you would use scriptlet tags. So I'll create a new servlet here, and here we go. And let's call it. Let's just call it connect. That'll do, connect. And I'll put it in a package called demo. And I'm only going to use the doGet method actually in this tutorial, so that'll do. And of course, now that the code that you have to add, you might be tempted to think, well, I'll connect to my database in the init method of the servlet and disconnect in the destroy method, and in my get or post I can query the database. Whatever you do, don't do that, because remember, this servlet will start up and it will only call its init method once, and after that it will field requests with doGet and doPost. So if you have two requests coming in simultaneously and you've just done a connect in the init method, which I don't actually have in this servlet, but you could create one by ticking the appropriate checkbox, then that one connection will be trying to handle multiple requests, and it may well refuse to do that. So you really need to create a connection if you connect this way every time you have a get or a post, and then disconnect afterwards. So we're going to do that here. And of course, if you wanna, you could have code like common code. You just put your connect and your disconnect if you want in separate methods, and just call them in doGet or doPost. And as I say, we'll look at a different way of doing this in the next tutorial. But for now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to load the driver. And to load the driver, you call class.forName, and you need to supply here the kind of location of the driver, which, if we look in libraries here, we may be able to see it. If I go to let's look at Apache Tomcat and the MySQL connector.jar, I need to load the class called com.mysql.jdbc.driver. So I need to load this class here, and to do that I'm going to say class.forName com.mysql.jdbc.driver, and save that. And now that throws an exception, so let's just handle that. And if you can't load your driver, then it can't find the jar file, and you probably want to just go to an error page or something. That shouldn't really happen, of course. But here, just so we can see the error, I'm just going to use a print writer to write out some information to the browser. So I'll say print writer out equals response dot get writer, and set the import with Control-Shift-O, and let's just write here out dot println can't load database driver, just so we can see what's happening. And now I can connect to the database, hopefully, and the method to use is driver manager dot get connection. So I'm using a static method of this driver manager class, and let's see if I can add it with Control-Shift-O. And to get connection, I have to supply a sort of connection URL, and the connection URL depends upon what port your database is running on. But in this case it's going to start with JDBC, I think it always does, and then colon and the name of your database, which is MySQL here, and then it's kind of like a file kind of directory name, because I have a colon here and a // as if you're typing C something or other for something on your C drive. And then I need to say my host here is, my database is running on localhost, and it's running on port 3306, which is the default MySQL port, and then another slash, and now I need to specify the name of the database. So my database here is its web shop. So I'm going to type here web shop, and that returns a, let's handle the exception there. So surrounded try catch. If I can't connect, let's just output some information here and say can't connect to database. And of course this you do want to handle gracefully. This probably should really forward to a JSP, because it's completely possible that your database will be down and that your user might end up seeing this message one day. And of course we've all probably gone to websites and seen the message can't connect to database or something like that, but it's probably nicer if you show them a proper JSP, like, and say, oh, the database is temporarily down, please come back later, or something like that. Now this returns a thing of type connection, so I'm going to declare that up here, connection con equals null, let's say, equals null, and let's say here con equals, and I'll add the import with Control-Shift-O, and you have to make sure to add the java.sql connection. Tempting to add the com.mysql.jdbc connection, but we actually don't want that one. We want this standard Java SQL connection thingy. And finally, don't ever forget to disconnect from your database, otherwise you'll reach the maximum number of connections and you won't be able to connect anymore. So I'll say down here con.close. And now in between here, of course, we could put some code that queries the database, and I won't do that in this tutorial, but we will look at that in future tutorials. So I'm going to just surround this with a try catch, and let's just get rid of this for the moment. There's not really much you can do if you can't close the connection, but you might want to consider logging the fact somewhere or something like that. And if we can connect, finally I'll say out.write print ln connected to database. Oops. If I can hit the right key there. There we go. Okay, so now let's run that and see what happens. So I'll say yes, always use that server, and there we go, and update the context root, why not, and click finish. And if we're lucky now, well, that's not what I wanted. So it's saying do get null pointer at line 51, and let's just have a look. So what have I done? I have done something crazy, and if we look down here at the bottom of Eclipse, you can see what line we're on, and in fact this line is the problem. And if I can't get connect to the database, actually I should return, because there's no point going on further. And let's run that, and I'm going to make sure that I need to connect, I need to select the right file to actually run. So let's just contract these libraries, go to demo, select connect.java and run that, and see if this makes a difference. And now it says can't connect to database. So let's take a look at what I've done wrong. And in fact I forgot something crucially important here. I forgot the username and password. So when you do driver manager.getConnection, you need to supply the username and password. And I've set up a user on this database, and my user here, which I connected to earlier on the command line, is web app, and I've got the highly insecure password hello. So let's supply it here with web app and password hello, and now fingers crossed we will be successful. Let's click finish and run that, and hey presto, now I'm connected to my database, which is running on this 3306 port on my machine. So that's it for this tutorial, and this technique for connecting to a database works fine, as I say, and lots of people use it, but we're going to look at a better method in the next tutorial, and then we're going to go on to do some basic database queries. So join me again next time, and until next time, happy coding.